He thought smashing her phone would end the story. He had no idea it was only the beginning. The late afternoon sun poured over downtown Atlanta, turning the glass towers gold and stretching long shadows across Peachtree Street. Cars rolled bumper to bumper. Horns echoed between buildings. Sidewalks pulsed with office workers heading home, tourists checking maps, delivery bikes weaving through traffic, and street vendors calling out over the noise. It was the kind of city moment where everything moved fast and nobody wanted to be delayed. Then everything stopped. Officer Daniel Mercer stepped into the crosswalk with the swagger of a man who believed the badge on his chest gave him ownership of the street. Tall, broad-shouldered, jaw tight, mirrored sunglasses hiding eyes already full of judgment, he raised one hand and pointed at a black sedan parked near the curb. His voice cut through the traffic like a siren. "Move the vehicle. Now." Several people turned. A few slowed down. Some kept walking, because in every major city people learn to avoid scenes that do not belong to them. But one woman did not move. Naomi Carter stood beside the sedan with one hand holding a phone at chest level, camera steady, posture calm. She wore a navy blazer, dark slacks, and low heels practical enough for a long day, polished enough for any boardroom in America. Her natural curls were tied back neatly. Her face revealed nothing except focus. She was recording the stop in silence. Mercer took 2 steps closer. "I said move the car." Naomi answered without raising her voice. "I'm legally parked. And I'm documenting this interaction." A ripple moved through the sidewalk crowd. People knew that tone. Controlled. Measured. Dangerous in a different way. Mercer's lips curled. "Documenting, hell. You people always think a phone makes you important." Naomi said nothing. She only adjusted the angle slightly and kept filming. Across the street, a teenager lifted his own phone. A woman carrying groceries paused near a bus stop. A ride-share driver lowered his window. The city was watching now. Mercer hated being watched. He snatched the phone from Naomi's hand so quickly several people gasped. She didn't lunge. Didn't shout. Didn't plead. She simply looked at him. The screen reflected the sunlight for half a second before Mercer let it fall onto the concrete. The device struck hard, slid near the curb, and cracked across the front glass. Then he placed his boot beside it and stared at the crowd like he expected applause. "Record that," he said. No one laughed. No one moved. The traffic noise suddenly felt far away. Naomi lowered her eyes to the broken phone. She bent gracefully, picked it up with both hands, and brushed a speck of dust from the shattered corner as if handling something valuable that could still be saved. Mercer smirked. "You got a problem, hmm?" That was when she looked up, and for the first time something changed in the air. Naomi smiled. Not a nervous smile. Not an angry smile. A patient smile. The kind people wear when they already know the ending. Mercer shifted slightly. It was small, almost invisible, but those closest to him noticed. Naomi glanced at the silver watch on her wrist, then back at him. Her voice remained soft enough that people leaned in to hear it. "Officer Mercer, you have less than 3 minutes." A murmur rolled through the sidewalk. Mercer frowned. 3 minutes for what? Naomi carefully slipped the damaged phone into her bag. "For panic," she said. Somewhere in the distance, faint but growing louder, sirens began to rise. The sirens grew louder, not from one direction but several, weaving through downtown traffic with sharp precision. Officer Daniel Mercer turned toward the sound and forced a laugh that landed flat against the silence around him. "Nice trick," he said. "You call some friends to make a scene?" Naomi Carter did not answer. She stood beside the black sedan with one hand resting lightly on her bag, shoulders relaxed, eyes steady. Around them, the crowd had doubled. Office workers lingered near the curb. A food delivery rider removed one earbud. A mother pulling a stroller paused beside a newsstand. Even drivers trapped at the red light leaned out of open windows to see what came next. Mercer hated losing control of a room, and now he was losing control of an entire block. "Step back from the vehicle," he barked. Naomi remained still. "Is that a lawful order, Officer Mercer, or just another impulse?" A few people exchanged glances. Someone near the bus stop whispered, "She knows his name." Mercer stiffened. "How do you know my name?" Naomi tilted her head slightly. "It is printed on your chest. You would be surprised how often people reveal themselves before they ever speak." The first black SUV turned the corner and stopped 20 feet away. Then a second. Then a third. No city seals. No department logos. Dark windows. Clean lines. Government vehicles moved with a kind of confidence ordinary traffic never had. Doors opened in near-perfect sequence. Men and women stepped out wearing business attire, earpieces, and expressions that did not need introductions. The sidewalk went silent. Mercer reached for the radio on his shoulder. "Dispatch, identify units approaching Peachtree and 7th. His voice was sharp now, thinner than before. Static answered first. Then a dispatcher who suddenly sounded careful. "Stand by, Officer Mercer." "Repeat, stand by." Mercer swallowed. He looked at Naomi again, this time without the smirk. "Who are you?" Naomi glanced once more at her watch. 2 minutes, she said. A tall man in a charcoal suit approached with 2 others behind him. Mid-50s, silver hair, calm eyes, the posture of someone who had spent decades walking into rooms where everyone else stood up. He stopped directly in front of Naomi first. "Are you all right?" Naomi handed him the cracked phone. It still recorded long enough. He nodded once, then turned to Mercer. "Officer Daniel Mercer?" Mercer squared his shoulders. "Who is asking?" "Federal Civil Rights Oversight Division," the man said, presenting credentials for only a second before putting them away. "My name is Director Samuel Reeves. We need your department-issued body camera, your radio logs, and your immediate cooperation." The crowd exhaled in one collective breath. A teenager near the curb whispered, "Oh man." Mercer forced a smile that looked painful. "This is ridiculous." She was interfering with police work. Reeves did not blink. "Then your report should be easy to verify." Mercer glanced at the shattered phone in Naomi's hand, then at the faces surrounding him. Every face had changed. Minutes earlier they were spectators. Now they were witnesses. Captain Robert Hayes arrived moments later in a patrol SUV, stepping out so quickly he nearly forgot to close the door. He saw the federal vehicles, saw Reeves, saw Naomi, and all color drained from his face. "Miss Carter," he said quietly. Naomi met his eyes. "Captain." Hayes turned toward Mercer with the look of a man who suddenly understood the cost of one careless moment. "What did you do?" Mercer opened his mouth, but no words came. Naomi reached into her bag, removed a slim leather credential case, and held it where everyone could see. "Federal badge. Official seal." Her voice was calm as church bells. "I am Special Investigator Naomi Carter. And this intersection was an active compliance audit." The words active compliance audit hung in the Atlanta air heavier than the traffic noise, heavier than the sirens, heavier than Officer Daniel Mercer's silence. For a long second, no one moved. Then the city seemed to inhale all at once. Phones rose higher. Whispers spread like wind through dry leaves. A man in a Braves cap muttered, "I knew something was off." A woman near the crosswalk shook her head slowly and said, "He picked the wrong day." Mercer looked from Naomi Carter to Director Samuel Reeves, then to Captain Robert Hayes, searching for one familiar face that might rescue him from what had become very public reality. He found none. Captain Hayes stepped forward first. "Remove your radio and body camera, Officer Mercer." His tone was low, controlled, and far more dangerous than shouting. Mercer blinked. "Captain, with respect, this woman provoked the situation." Naomi did not react. Reeves did. He opened a slim tablet handed to him by one of his agents and turned the screen toward Hayes. "We already have street footage from 3 angles, audio capture from nearby businesses, and live transmission recovered from Ms. Carter's device before it was damaged." Mercer's throat tightened visibly. "That phone was streaming?" Naomi finally answered him. "To a secure federal server." The teenager near the curb let out an involuntary laugh before covering his mouth. Mercer's shoulders dropped half an inch. It was the first honest movement he had made all afternoon. Hayes closed his eyes for a brief moment that looked like prayer or regret. Then he opened them and became captain again. "Badge. Now." Mercer hesitated. Cars continued rolling through the green light, but drivers slowed enough to stare. A city bus passed with faces pressed to the windows. The whole street had become a courtroom with no walls. Mercer unclipped the badge from his chest and placed it in Hayes's waiting hand. The small metal sound it made felt louder than any siren. Naomi watched without triumph. That unsettled Mercer more than anger would have. "You set me up," he said. Her expression remained calm. "No, Officer Mercer. I observed you. There is a difference." Reeves nodded toward the black sedan. "Ms. Carter, do you wish to continue on site or relocate to headquarters?" "Here," she said. "People deserve to know what accountability looks like." Several in the crowd murmured approval. Mercer turned red. "This is humiliation." Naomi met his eyes steadily. "Humiliation is being judged before you speak. Today you are only being seen." Hayes looked as though the words hit him too. He turned to 2 internal affairs supervisors who had just arrived. "Escort Officer Mercer to the vehicle. Preserve all communications logs from his shift. Notify legal immediately." Mercer took 1 step back. "You cannot do this over one misunderstanding." Reeves answered before anyone else could. This review did not begin today. Today was confirmation. Another agent handed Naomi a thin folder. She opened it and scanned pages already tabbed with colored markers. Citizen complaints. Traffic stop disparities. Prior warnings dismissed. Body camera gaps. Patterns hidden inside paperwork until someone bothered to read it all. Mercer stared at the folder as if it contained a stranger's life. Naomi closed it gently. "Every system leaves footprints," she said. "Some people assume no one will follow them." The crowd had changed again. Earlier it wanted drama. Now it wanted meaning. A middle-aged man removed his hat. The mother with the stroller whispered something to her child and pointed at Naomi. Across the street, a store manager stepped outside holding a cup of coffee he had forgotten to drink. Hayes exhaled slowly. "Ms. Carter, on behalf of the department," Naomi raised one hand. "Save statements for after reforms. Apologies without change are only theater." Reeves almost smiled. Mercer was guided toward the SUV, no handcuffs, no spectacle, just consequences walking on 2 feet. Before he entered, he turned back once more. "Naomi, what happens now?" She glanced at the cracked phone in her hand, then at the cameras recording everything. "Now, Officer Mercer, people get to hear the part that usually stays quiet." The question lingered over Peachtree Street like thunder that had not decided whether to break. What usually stayed quiet was now stepping into daylight. Officer Daniel Mercer disappeared into the black SUV, the door closing with a soft click that sounded final. No shouting. No struggle. No dramatic scene. Just the weight of a man meeting the end of borrowed certainty. The crowd watched the vehicle but kept glancing back at Naomi Carter, as if they sensed the real story had not even begun. Director Samuel Reeves turned to the nearest camera phones and spoke in a measured voice built by years of hearings, investigations, and rooms where truth had to fight to be heard. This operation was authorized after a 12-month review of traffic enforcement complaints, missing footage reports, selective citations, and repeated allegations of unequal treatment in this district. Murmurs moved through the sidewalk again, slower now, deeper. 12 months. People realized this was not about one broken phone or one reckless afternoon. It was about patterns, habits, and silence dressed as procedure. Captain Robert Hayes stood beside him with the expression of a man replaying old decisions. He removed his cap, ran a hand across his forehead, and stared down the avenue as if searching for a version of the day that could still be repaired. Naomi stepped toward him. "Captain, when did you first know there was a problem?" Hayes did not answer immediately. Traffic lights changed. A MARTA train rumbled somewhere in the distance. Finally he spoke. When complaints started sounding the same. From people who had never met each other. Naomi nodded once. Then why did nothing change? Hayes looked older than he had 10 minutes earlier. Because numbers looked clean on paper. Because results were rewarded. Because I told myself I needed more proof. Naomi held up the cracked phone. Sometimes proof stands right in front of us and still gets ignored. A local reporter pushed through the edge of the crowd, microphone in hand, station logo bright against her jacket. Lisa Monroe from Channel 8. "Ms. Carter, were you targeted because of race?" Naomi answered without hurry. "I was targeted because some people see authority as something that belongs to certain faces and not others. Race was not hidden in this moment. It was assumed. Pens moved. Phones recorded." Hayes lowered his eyes. Another reporter asked if more officers were under review. Reeves responded carefully. "We follow evidence, not rumors. But evidence often travels in groups." That line spread through the crowd instantly. Someone repeated it to a friend. Another typed it online. Across the street, store employees had gathered in the doorway. Drivers at the light rolled down windows just to listen. A city that usually rushed now stood still for accountability. Naomi opened the folder again and removed several complaint forms. Names blacked out. Dates visible. Locations familiar. Same blocks. Same hours. Same officer names appearing beside different stories that felt painfully alike. She handed them to Hayes. "These were sent to your office 6 months ago." Hayes accepted the papers with both hands, almost like receiving something sacred and shameful at the same time. "I know," he said quietly. Naomi's voice softened, but only slightly. "Then today is not just his consequence. It is yours too." Hayes swallowed hard. "You are right." Reeves glanced toward the federal vehicles. "We can continue this downtown or at headquarters." Naomi looked at the people surrounding them. A grandmother holding shopping bags. A teenager still filming. A businessman who had missed his light twice and did not care. She shook her head. "Right here. Systems fail in public. Repair should begin there too." Hayes straightened his posture. 4. The first time that day, he sounded like a leader instead of a survivor. Effective immediately, Officer Mercer is suspended pending termination review. External audits begin tonight. Complaint channels reopen by 6 o'clock. Mandatory bias and conduct retraining starts this week. The crowd broke into surprised applause. Naomi did not smile. She only looked at the broken phone once more. Then she said the words that silenced everyone again. "Good. Now let us see who resists change when nobody is watching." Applause faded into the steady hum of downtown traffic, but the energy on Peachtree Street had changed in a way no one could mistake. People were no longer watching a scandal. They were watching a standard being set. Phones stayed raised. Reporters kept arriving. Office workers who should have been home by now remained on the sidewalk as if leaving too early might mean missing history. Naomi Carter stood near the black sedan, calm as ever, while city lights began to flicker on one by one above the avenue. Director Samuel Reeves checked his watch and gave a brief nod to 2 agents carrying sealed evidence cases. The operation was moving into its next phase. Captain Robert Hayes turned to the cluster of uniformed officers who had formed near the curb. Some looked stunned. Some looked embarrassed. A few looked angry in the quiet way people do when change arrives without asking permission. Hayes noticed all of it. Effective immediately, he said, every officer assigned to this district will report for records review and conduct interviews. Body camera compliance checks begin tonight. No exceptions. One younger officer stepped forward. Captain, does this mean everyone is under suspicion? Hayes answered without hesitation. It means everyone is under responsibility. The crowd murmured approval again. Naomi glanced toward the young officer. Accountability can feel personal when someone has benefited from distance. He lowered his eyes but nodded slowly. Across the street, Lisa Monroe continued her live report, speaking into the camera with the urgency local news reserved for moments people would replay later. Sources now confirm this federal review may expand beyond one district. Witnesses say the incident began with what appeared to be an ordinary traffic encounter. There was nothing ordinary about it anymore. A city bus rolled past and passengers pressed against the windows to see the woman with the federal badge and the captain without excuses. Reeves approached Naomi and handed her a fresh phone still in its packaging. Temporary replacement, he said. Government issue. Naomi almost smiled. I liked the old one. It did its job. Reeves looked at the cracked device in the evidence bag. Some tools only need one day to matter. Hayes heard that and stepped closer. Miss Carter, I owe you more than a statement. Naomi met his gaze. Then do more than speak. He nodded. Civilian Review Board powers will be expanded. Complaint responses will be public. Repeat misconduct flags will trigger automatic outside review. Naomi studied him for a moment, measuring whether this was panic talking or principle finally waking up. We will see, she said. Promises are easy in front of cameras. Hayes accepted the blow because he knew it was true. From inside one of the SUVs, Mercer briefly became visible through the tinted rear window. His outline sat rigid and motionless. The man who once commanded the intersection now watched from behind glass while the city moved on without him. Naomi did not look toward the vehicle. She had already turned her attention elsewhere. A middle-aged woman carrying grocery bags approached carefully. Miss Carter, she said, voice trembling just enough to show courage had been expensive. He stopped my son last year for no reason. We complained. Nothing happened. Naomi took one of the cards from her pocket and placed it in the woman's hand. Call that number tonight. Use your name or do not. But tell the truth. Others stepped forward after that. A rideshare driver. A college student. A restaurant manager. Stories began lining up where silence had stood only minutes earlier. Reeves watched the growing line and spoke quietly to Hayes. This is what backlog looks like when trust breaks. Hayes stared at the people waiting to be heard and seemed unable to look away. Streetlights glowed warmer now. Evening settled over Atlanta. The crowd that came for drama was staying for testimony. Naomi powered on the replacement phone, opened a fresh recording, and pointed the camera not at officers but at citizens. Then she said in a voice steady enough to carry across the block, "The floor is yours." For a moment no one moved, as if the city itself understood that something rare was happening and did not want to interrupt it. Then the first voice began. The middle-aged woman with grocery bags stepped closer to Naomi Carter's camera, straightened her shoulders, and spoke with the careful tone of someone who had practiced courage in private for years. My son was pulled over 3 times in 2 months on his way to work. Same route. Same questions. Same officer once. We filed complaints. Nobody called back. She paused, looked toward Captain Robert Hayes, then finished quietly. We stopped believing anyone would listen. Naomi lowered the phone only enough to keep the woman framed clearly. I am listening now, she said. The woman nodded once, relief and grief mixing in her eyes. Next came the rideshare driver, a man in his 40s wearing a faded polo shirt and work badge. They searched my trunk twice last summer while customers watched. Said it was routine. My rating dropped after that week because people do not like being picked up by someone treated like a suspect. The crowd murmured. Many had stories. Most had never told them out loud. Lisa Monroe's live truck lights washed the sidewalk in bright white as more reporters arrived. What had started as one confrontation was becoming something larger, something impossible to reduce to a headline. Director Samuel Reeves watched the line grow and quietly directed agents to collect names, dates, and case numbers. Not rumors. Records. Patterns become undeniable when details survive. A college student wearing a Georgia State hoodie stepped forward next. He held a backpack strapped tightly across his chest. I got stopped walking home from the library because I fit a description. I asked what description. They said male. The crowd reacted with sharp disbelief. Hayes closed his eyes for a second, then opened them like a man refusing to hide inside comfort any longer. Officer. Supervisors, he called out, set up tables now. Complaint intake starts here. Tonight. Several uniformed officers hesitated. Hayes' voice hardened. That was not a suggestion. Folding tables were brought from patrol vehicles. Clipboards appeared. Pens. Water bottles. What had been a city block of spectacle turned into a sidewalk office for accountability under streetlights and camera flashes. Naomi moved slowly from person to person, recording statements, asking dates, names, intersections, times. Calm questions. No speeches. No grandstanding. She knew truth grows stronger when it is organized. Through the tinted window of the SUV, Mercer remained visible only as a shadow. A man who once loved being seen now sat where no one could hear him. Reeves approached Hayes again. You understand this reaches beyond one officer. Hayes nodded. I do now. Then act like it, Reeves said. Hayes turned to the assembled officers. Effective immediately, every complaint previously marked unresolved will be reopened. Supervisors who ignored documented misconduct will be reviewed. If you did your job honestly, you have nothing to fear. If you hid behind someone else's badge, tonight is different. Silence followed. It was not the old silence of avoidance. It was the new silence that comes before truth chooses sides. Naomi finished one statement and handed the replacement phone to an agent so batteries could be changed. She flexed her fingers once, then looked up at the growing line. It stretched past the bus stop, around the corner, into the evening crowd. People who had rushed home now stood patiently to speak. Atlanta traffic rolled by, horns softer now, as if the city understood it was passing something important. A little boy holding his mother's hand tugged her sleeve and pointed at Naomi. Is she police? He asked. His mother looked at Naomi, then at the tables, then at Captain Hayes signing forms himself. No, she said gently. She is what police are supposed to answer to. Naomi heard it and glanced over. For the first time all day, she smiled fully. Then she lifted the fresh phone, aimed it toward the line of waiting citizens, and said, one at a time. We have been late long enough. By 7:30 the sky above Atlanta had turned deep blue, and the glass towers along Peachtree Street reflected city lights like rows of watchful eyes. Yet no one was leaving. The line to speak now wrapped past the corner pharmacy and doubled back beside the bus shelter. Some held old complaint numbers folded in wallets. Some carried screenshots. Some brought nothing except memory and the need to finally be believed. Naomi Carter moved with steady focus from one statement to the next, never rushing anyone, never promising what she could not control. She asked clear questions. Date. Time. Location. Names if known. Witnesses if present. Truth becomes stronger when it is specific, she said more than once. Director Samuel Reeves had converted the sidewalk into a temporary intake command post. Folding tables filled with forms, laptops, charging cables, bottled water, and stacks of evidence envelopes stretched beneath portable lights. Federal agents typed quickly. Internal affairs investigators reviewed archived files on tablets. For years, complaints had entered systems designed to exhaust people. Tonight, the system was standing outdoors where everyone could see it work. Captain Robert Hayes remained at the center of it all, jacket off, sleeves rolled, signing authorizations and answering difficult questions from reporters who no longer treated him as the only voice in uniform. Were supervisors aware of repeated allegations? Why were cases marked unresolved? How many body camera gaps existed district-wide? Hayes did not dodge. "I should have demanded better sooner," he said into a cluster of microphones. That sentence traveled through the crowd like a shockwave because people recognized how rare it was. Not perfection. Not denial. Responsibility. Across the street, Lisa Monroe delivered another live update. City leaders are now arriving on scene as public pressure intensifies. Behind her, a black SUV with municipal plates stopped at the curb. Councilwoman Denise Holloway stepped out in heels made for offices, not sidewalks, but she walked straight into the middle of the line without ceremony. She shook hands with residents, accepted complaint copies, and then approached Naomi. "Ms. Carter, the council will call an emergency session tonight." Naomi looked up from her notes. "Good. Invite the people who waited years first." Holloway nodded without argument. Near the federal vehicles, the tinted rear door of the SUV opened at last. Mercer stepped out under escort, no longer the largest presence on the block. His shoulders were tight, tie loosened, certainty gone. He glanced at the cameras and instantly looked down. No one shouted at him. No one surged forward. That silence hit harder than anger ever could. He was led toward a second vehicle for transfer processing. As he passed, he stopped 3 feet from Hayes. "Captain, you are going to let them destroy me over one mistake?" Hayes held his gaze. "No, Daniel. Your choices did that." Mercer turned toward Naomi next. She remained beside the intake table, writing case numbers with calm precision. "You wanted this," he said. Naomi capped her pen and finally looked at him. "No. I wanted a day where no one needed this." Mercer had no answer. He was guided away, swallowed by flashing lights and moving doors. The crowd barely watched. They had moved on to things larger than one fallen officer. A pastor in a dark coat began handing out coffee. Restaurant workers from nearby shops brought sandwiches and trays of fries. Strangers held places in line for elderly neighbors. The city was organizing itself around honesty. Reeve stepped beside Naomi. "You know this will be national by morning." She continued writing. "Then let morning earn it." He smiled faintly. Hayes approached one final time, holding a sealed envelope. Emergency suspension orders for 3 additional officers tied to reopened complaints. Naomi accepted the envelope, weighed it in her hand, then passed it back. "Keep it. Sign them where cameras can see." Hayes did exactly that on the hood of a patrol car under bright lights while residents watched in complete silence. Pen strokes can sound louder than sirens when they arrive late enough. Naomi looked at the endless line still waiting and lifted the replacement phone once more. Her voice carried down the block like something both gentle and immovable. "Next person. Your story has been standing long enough." Night settled fully over Peachtree Street, but the block glowed brighter than it had all day. Portable floodlights cast clean white circles across folding tables, camera crews, patrol vehicles, and the long patient line of residents still waiting to speak. What began as a single moment of arrogance had become a public ledger. Every statement taken, every reopened complaint, every signature made under watchful eyes added another line to it. Naomi Carter continued moving from person to person with the same measured calm she had shown when the first sirens arrived. She did not chase emotion. She organized it. Dates. Badge numbers. Intersections. Witness names. Old report numbers found in desk drawers. Videos once ignored. The truth was arriving in pieces, but it was arriving fast. Director Samuel Reeves stood beside a laptop station reviewing fresh data from city archives. He called Captain Robert Hayes over and turned the screen toward him. Heat maps of traffic stops pulsed red over the same few neighborhoods. Citation ratios climbed sharply whenever cameras were absent. Complaints spiked under certain supervisors and then disappeared into administrative closures. Hayes stared at the numbers as if they were more painful than any accusation. "I signed off on summaries," he said quietly. "I never looked underneath them." Reeves answered without sympathy and without cruelty. "Neglect is often quieter than misconduct, Captain, but the damage travels just as far." Hayes nodded because there was nothing else left to do. Across the street, Councilwoman Denise Holloway announced through a bullhorn that the emergency council session would begin within the hour and would be streamed live. Residents cheered, but Naomi did not look up. Celebration before structure was how people got fooled twice. Lisa Monroe approached again, microphone ready. "Ms. Carter, many are calling you a hero tonight." Naomi finally paused and met the reporter's eyes. "Heroes are what people ask for when systems fail. I would prefer functioning systems." The answer spread online almost instantly. Nearby, volunteers passed out coffee, bottled water, and paper cups of hot soup from a diner that had closed early just to help. Strangers held each other's places in line. Older residents were escorted to chairs. A city that had learned to expect indifference was practicing care in public. Then one of Reeves's agents stepped forward carrying a sealed evidence box and a printed chain of custody form. "We recovered departmental server backups," he said. Missing body camera files were not missing. They were archived off-cycle. Hayes looked stunned. "Who authorized that?" The agent slid a page forward with names. 2 supervisors. 1 retired commander. Hayes read the list, and the blood seemed to leave his face all over again. Naomi took the page, scanned it once, then handed it back. "There it is," she said softly. "Panic with paperwork." Reeves almost smiled. Additional suspension orders were drafted on the spot. This time Hayes signed them without needing cameras nearby, but cameras captured it anyway. Mercer's name had started the evening. It was no longer the biggest name on the page. A cheer rose from the line when the news spread, but Naomi lifted one hand for quiet. "Do not cheer for collapse," she said. "Cheer when something honest survives after it." The crowd obeyed. Even Celebration listened to her. A teenage boy stepped up next, holding a cracked phone of his own. "They took this last year," he said. "Never logged it." Naomi accepted the device carefully, as if receiving evidence and trust together. "We will document it tonight," she said. Midnight approached, yet no one wanted to leave. Streetlights buzzed overhead. Reporters spoke in hushed, urgent tones. Officers once certain of routine now moved with visible caution. Hayes stood beside the intake tables collecting forms himself. Council staff carried boxes of records toward waiting vehicles. Reeves watched the block and said to Naomi, "One afternoon changed the whole city." Naomi slipped the teenager's phone into an evidence bag and shook her head. No. The city was ready to change. One mistake just removed the disguise. She looked down the sidewalk at the people still waiting in line, then raised the replacement phone and called the words that now sounded like justice itself. "Next." By 12:15 in the morning, downtown Atlanta looked nothing like it had that afternoon. The traffic had thinned to scattered headlights and passing buses. Office towers stood dark except for a few late windows glowing high above the avenue. But on Peachtree Street, the lights were still on. Portable lamps hummed over tables stacked with completed forms, evidence envelopes, coffee cups, and charging cables. The line that once wrapped around the block had finally shortened, not because people stopped coming, but because they had finally been heard. Naomi Carter sat at the edge of one folding table reviewing the last intake sheets of the night. Her replacement phone rested beside her, screen bright, battery nearly gone again. Director Samuel Reeves closed a laptop and stretched his shoulders. Preliminary count, he said. 87 formal statements. 23 reopened complaints tied to archived files. For immediate suspensions. 2 criminal referrals pending review. Naomi nodded once. Numbers mattered. But she knew numbers alone could still be buried if no one attached memory to them. Captain Robert Hayes approached carrying a cardboard tray with 2 cups of coffee. He offered one awkwardly. Naomi accepted it after a moment. "Thank you, Captain." He looked tired in the honest way people do after finally facing themselves. "Robert," he said quietly. "Tonight I think I have lost the right to hide behind titles." Naomi took a sip. "Then earn it back the slow way." Hayes gave a small tired smile. "I suspect that is the only way left." Across the street, council staff loaded record boxes into city vans. Lisa Monroe wrapped her final live segment, voice hoarse but energized. Councilwoman Denise Holloway stood with residents exchanging direct phone numbers instead of campaign promises. Even the officers still assigned to the perimeter moved differently now, posture straighter, voices softer, eyes aware that every ordinary moment could become evidence of character. Reeves handed Naomi a sealed pouch. Inside lay the broken phone, returned after processing. The screen was split with spiderweb cracks. The frame was bent at one corner. Naomi held it in both hands for a long second. "Funny," Reeves said, "how something broken can still expose so much." Naomi looked down the avenue where the first hints of dawn threatened the horizon beyond the buildings. It was never the phone. It was what he believed he could do without consequence. Hayes heard that and lowered his gaze. A janitor from a nearby building walked over pushing a cleaning cart. He recognized Naomi and stopped. He said, "I watched all night from the lobby. My daughter starts college next fall. Tonight felt important for her somehow." Naomi smiled warmly. "Then tell her this city can still learn." The man nodded and continued down the sidewalk. One by one, tables were folded. Evidence boxes were sealed. Reporters packed cables. Volunteers gathered empty cups and leftover food. The block slowly returned to concrete, lane markings, and ordinary street noise. Yet nothing about it felt ordinary anymore. Hayes extended his hand. "Ms. Carter, I know trust does not come back because of one night. But I intend to keep the lights on after the cameras leave." Naomi shook his hand firmly. "Good. That is when reform begins." Reeves signaled that the convoy was ready. Naomi placed the broken phone in her bag instead of throwing it away. Some reminders deserve to stay cracked. As she walked toward the waiting SUV, a young boy from earlier called out from across the street, "Is everything fixed now?" Naomi paused, turned, and looked at the city waking behind him. "Not yet," she said. "But now people know where to start." She entered the vehicle, and the convoy rolled quietly into the thinning darkness. Peachtree Street was almost empty again. Wind moved discarded flyers along the curb. A traffic light changed from red to green for no cars at all. On the sidewalk where power had once stood shouting, only silence remained. And in that silence, Atlanta learned something simple and expensive. Some people break objects in seconds. It can take a whole city one night to break their illusion.